Welcome back, everyone. In this video, our goal is to create a brand new map, and then we're going to set up a landscape layer. That is these layers right over here in our landscape mode that'll just contain splines and only splines. So with this layer in place, we can make it so that splines can be added to their own non-destructive landscape layer. Of course, we could add a layer here in our map sculpting, but let's start fresh, shall we? We haven't created a new map in a while here, so I'm going to come under File in the upper left. We're going to create a new level, and in my little pop-up here, I'm going to choose the default level because, you know, I like a pretty sky. And I'm going to select our floor here, this floor mesh. We're going to hit delete. And then let's do Shift plus 3. Let's practice those hotkeys. Shift plus the 3 key. That'll jump us directly on over to the landscape mode. And I'm going to be fine with all of these default settings down here, although I need to make sure, this is absolutely critical, that you enable edit layers. So make sure that you check that checkbox. Also, for the material here, let's slot in our landscape material right away. So I'm going to come down under landscape materials. Those of you that have created a material instance, this is a good spot to go ahead and slot this in. And once you do that, you're going to see this layers with the drop down triangle right here. You're going to want to slot in these different landscape layer info objects as well to do this properly. And I've got a few different grass options here. That's the proper pathway. My gravel, yes. Path, not the infinity blade path. I want that. I'm looking at the tooltips for knowing which landscape layer info object that I truly want. Rock. There's my one in the landscape materials folder. Snow, that's the proper one. Again, I'm looking at the tooltip to determine the proper pathway of my landscape layer info objects. And cobblestone. Okay, so with that all in place, again, please have enable edit layers checked. Very important. We can leave all these settings down here. We're going to simply create this here landscape. And of course, I get a nice row of bushes everywhere because we've got in our paint mode, our mud layer, we have some mud going on where we had the fields going on with our bushes. That's fine. No worries for that for the time being. Okay, first things first, we need to add a spline layer. Currently in our enable edit layers, we've only got one layer. How do we add another one simply for splines? Well, we can right click on our list of layers over here, and it doesn't matter if you're in sculpt mode or paint mode or manage mode, it doesn't really matter. You can simply right click on this and you can create a brand new layer. So let's go ahead and create a brand new layer. And this one is going to be called layer number 1 by default, but I'm going to right click on it and we're going to rename it, and I'm going to call it splines because we are eventually going to reserve this layer for just splines. Now, this is going to be our base layer, our currently labeled layer. So I'm going to right click on this one and I'm going to just simply rename it base. And next thing I am going to do is right click on my splines layer up here, and you can see in the drop down I've got an option to reserve for splines. Now note something. This is my currently selected layer, my splines layer. I'm going to go into sculpt mode really quick. And yeah, sure, I'll just use my sculpt tool. I'm simply going to sculpt some landscape here. So note, I've got my splines layer selected and I've simply sculpted some of my landscape. Now, what happens is if I try to right click on this layer and reserve for splines, I'm going to get a little bit of a message here. It's going to say reserving layer splines for landscape splines will clear its content and no addition will be allowed. So if I click yes here, what's going to happen is it's going to get rid of that sculpting and any painting I would have done there as well. When you reserve a layer for splines, which you can see now shows up in parentheses here, that'll get rid of any sculpting or painting that you had done specifically in that layer. This layer is reserved only for splines. And as you can see right now, I'm in sculpting mode with my sculpt tool and my brush is red saying, hey, you can't do this. You're not allowed. Same with, and if I try to click, you can see I get a little message there saying it's reserved for splines. Same thing if I go over to paint. So long as I've got my splines layer selected here, I cannot paint on here. I will get a message saying, hey, it's reserved for landscape splines. Now, note our untitled level here currently has 2 different layers. If I want to do sculpting or painting, I need to select my base layer here, and here I am allowed to paint some grass if I want to paint some grass, or if I want to sculpt, I can sculpt on this base layer. However, with the splines layer selected, I cannot sculpt, I cannot paint. Okay, we're in a good position here. Let's go ahead and save our new level here. I'm going to click this Save Current button up here. It's going to ask me where I want to save this. I do want to save it within my Landscapes Maps folder, so I'm going to simply call it, I'll call it Splines. Yeah, just Splines will be good. Splines, we'll click Save. And with that saved, I'm going to jump into my project settings here. And you can access this by going Settings, Project Settings. And I'm going to select my Maps and Modes option right here. In my Editor Startup Map, I'm going to change to be Splines. And that way, the next time I open my editor here, it'll open automatically to the Splines layer, so I don't have to open it manually. Nice little trick. All right, guys, that is going to do it all for this video. In the next video, we will cover some of the spline tool basics. See you there.